Assalamualaikum. Inshallah, we're going to get started right away. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Nawayna at-ta'allum wa at-ta'lim. Wa at-tadhakkur wa at-tadhkir. Wa al-naf'a wa al-intifa'a. Wa al-ifadata wa al-istifada. والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, and to encourage holding fast to the book of God and the way of his messenger, and to call unto guidance and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family and companions and followers. Ameen. So I know it's been a few weeks since we've been together. Alhamdulillah, it's really nice to be back with you all. I wanted to first start by just saying, how's everybody doing? Welcome to the month of Sha'ban. And alhamdulillah, we just finished the 15th of Sha'ban, right before the start of this class. So I feel like it's a blessed month to be together. It's a blessed day to be together and blessed evening. I'm happy to be here at the majlis with you all at the end of this day, alhamdulillah. We had an assignment for a few weeks ago, and it was a really simple one, and it's actually one that's a repeat assignment from before. And if anyone would like to share what that is. Thank you, dear Sophia.
Think about one harmful thing, whether it's physical or spiritual, and work on removing it.
Okay, think about one harmful thing, whether it's physical or spiritual, and work on removing it. So if anyone has any thoughts or reflections on that assignment, if they were able to do it at any level, even if they could compare it to maybe the previous time that we had done something like this, and you would like to share, we would love to hear your reflections.
So the first, I thought about it, and I already wanted to work on, for example, limiting social media. And so before I came to school, I was already working on that, and I'm struggling. And then he gave the assignments on the use those for that. The first day I forgot, and then the first 3 days after that, I struggled so hard. Like I failed. And then afterwards, get after work.
SubhanAllah.
So but then the week after that, I forgot about this and I didn't have class.
Yeah.
And then I remembered again. I'm like, okay, gotta go back to that. So it's been a lot better.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I think you said something so important, is that sometimes when we're trying to do something initially, it's very disappointing to fail initially when you set your weekly goal or whatever it is. But the fact that you persisted past, you said the first 3 days, it's amazing, because it's actually like, if you can fail and not take it, and fail is like, maybe I don't even use that word, but as long as you don't take it personally and just be like, okay, I can try again tomorrow. I can try again tomorrow. I can try, as like, we take it subconsciously, we take it really personally when we don't reach the whatever that goal is. But if we kind of don't take it personally, and like, it's part of like, I want to say there's a relationship with that and like your nafs, right? Because the nafs feels really bad when it doesn't meet one of its goals, right? And it starts to, it creates a narrative. But if you can sort of like quiet the nafs down and be like, it's okay, we're gonna get through this, then you can move on beyond the whispering of the nafs and try again. And part of it is just silencing the sort of the interference. And so subhanAllah, I think it's really amazing. Actually, it tells me more that you failed for 3 days and then you when you persisted after that, you saw a change, alhamdulillah. So that's amazing. And that's a really good reminder for all of us. Alhamdulillah. Sophia?
Mine was a little different. I recognized a quality that I wanted to change. And so I think at first, for me, just coming to that recognition and then trying. So it's still, I realize it's going to take time. It's just something about myself that I want to improve.
Yeah.
So, but I kind of felt like her, like, oh, I made the intention, I recognized it. How come it didn't happen already? So I felt like I failed, and then I just had to tell myself, it's okay, it's going to take time. Step one is recognition.
SubhanAllah. Alhamdulillah. Any other? And I like that too, because certain things you just know they're going to be more long term. But if one of the things that I've heard my teachers say to me personally a lot is be patient with yourself, be patient with yourself, be patient with yourself. Because I want to see like instant change. I'm like, I want to see this, like, what's going on? They're like, be patient. It's like, okay, all right. So yeah. Any other thoughts or reflections with the assignment? So I'm going to share something that happened. This is quite, what's the word? Vulnerable for me to share like this, but I will. So as you all know, I have a little bit of a coffee drinking issue, right? But there was a period of time where I worked, alhamdulillah, just like in the not so distant past, where I literally eliminated all caffeine, not just coffee, but tea, green tea, black tea, all caffeine. And I was good for like, I want to say like 6 weeks or something. I didn't count it, but I was like literally off caffeine, right? And I felt like I had arrived, you know, to where I wanted to be, alhamdulillah. And then my, just different life circumstances changed significantly, right? So as you know, I started a master's program, and then I started another seminary program, and like, so it's going to 2 schools while I'm still trying to maintain everything else. So I was able to eliminate it before like everything changed, right? But and so now I'm drinking copious amounts of coffee again after having eliminated it completely. And so one of the lessons that I'm taking it for myself personally is like, once you remove something negative, right, and you're like from your life as it is, maybe the circumstances of your life will actually change significantly, and now you have to try to remove it in a much more difficult context. So you removed it in an easy context, or not easy, you know what I mean, like in a normal situation. Now life is more demanding in different ways, and now you have to do the whole thing all over again, but on this other level. And what I imagine might happen, Allahu Alam, is I may end up, inshallah, eradicating caffeine again, and then life changing again. And so in each time, being able to start over again and do this thing that that you thought you just needed to do it once, but maybe you need to do it more than once. So that was that's my contribution for today. Any other thoughts or reflections before we go to the surah? All right, so we'll now move on to, we were on Surah Al-Jumu'ah. We're going to, inshallah, be able to finish the surah before the month of Ramadan starts. And then we will have, inshallah, our special Ramadan. In Ramadan, we have a special mini-series. Each teacher, instructor does a different mini-series in Ramadan. So when Ramadan starts, we'll be doing that. Also, just a reminder, I got a text message to make sure I remind everyone. The very first Sunday night of Ramadan, we have our annual banquet. And it's not going to be here at New Horizon. It's going to be at a country club in Seal Beach, which is just past where the Garden Grove Mosque is, just a little bit past that. So the flyer is over there if anyone's interested. And we're coming out with a new video, a new Majlis video, because our last one is dated. And so inshallah, it'll be released at the banquet, inshallah, for everyone. Yes.
I was seeing that I think the battery died for that
for the clock. Yes, I think you're right about that. Thank you for letting me know, because now I will not be relying on that for the class. Next class, inshallah. So we have
Possible that the tape stopped the second hand. I don't think so. After initially, the second hand was able to move because it was blocked by some tape coming out, but then I pushed the tape back, so I don't think that's the problem.
Okay, we'll have to examine that after class, inshallah. Thank you for letting me know. That's important for me to catch my train today. So I'm going to read the translation of the verses that we covered last time, and then we'll go into what Imam Ibn Ajib mentions about the verses, the allegorical meaning. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Whatsoever is in the heavens and whatsoever is on the earth glorifies God, the sovereign, the holy, the mighty, the wise. He it is who sent among the unlettered a messenger from among themselves, reciting unto them his signs, purifying them, and teaching them the book and wisdom, though before they were in manifest error. And others among them who have not yet joined them, and he is the mighty, the wise. That is the bounty of God, which he gives to whomsoever he will, and God is possessed of tremendous bounty. Imam Ibn Ajib says, whoever does not know Allah through a direct witnessing, it is as though they are from the Ummiyin, the unlettered. Just as Allah gifted his servants by sending to them the messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after mankind was in manifest error, so too upon his ummah after him, by sending of the shuyukh, right? There's not a really good translation for shuyukh, the teachers of tarbiyah, of what's a good translation for tarbiyah? Spiritual mentorship, maybe? Okay. The teachers, the guides of spiritual mentorship. They recite to them his ayat, his signs that direct and point to divine witnessing and his being manifest. And he, this is the divine, purifies them from, this is the, obviously because of this, he purifies them from the vices and impurities of character that would veil them from God. And he teaches them the secrets of the book and the secrets of the wisdom. And here he says the wisdom is the Sharia. As one is able to stop at, as one is able to stop at their secrets, or as no one is able to stop at their secrets, except after purifying the heart and purifying the nafs. And he says, even if before they met the shuyukh, they were in manifest error. And he sends also from the later ones from them, one that will remind them and get them to know Allah. And as such, the true callers will not end. Their chain will not be broken until the day of judgment. However, they will not be able to connect anyone except the ones Allah wants to be connected to him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for this reason, he mentions, ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. That is the bounty of God, and he gives to whomever he wills. And now we will go on to the verses for today, inshallah. So one of the things in the allegory, just as a review, is the comparison is drawn between the example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who was sent to mankind after they're in manifest error. And then this is a gift from God. And that this gift it was not just meant for the generation that received the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but also for all of mankind after the Prophet. There will always be continuous gifts that are sent by God, and that's people who will connect them to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and to the way of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And this, again, this chain of shuyukh that will be following on the way of the Prophet, but also connecting people to the divine and helping them to purify themselves on a spiritual level. This will not change until the day of judgment. And but at the same time, there's a reminder that no one will become connected in that way except the ones whom God chooses. And that's again from his gifts. And now for the verses for today. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. The parable of those who were made to bear the Torah, then did not bear it, is that of, I'm going to say donkey, okay? Is that of a donkey bearing books. How evil is the likeness of the people who denied God's signs, and God guides not the wrongdoing people. So this verse is interesting because of different words that are being used in it. The word that's used here is حملوا التوراة. So the example of those who carried. And Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that this indicates taklif. It's not just that they carry something on their back, it indicates something that they are responsible for. So, you know, in our Sharia, in fiqh, we talk about who's the mukallaf, who's the person who is accountable to God. They have to be of mature age, they have to be sane, they have to be Muslim, right? So it means that this, for example, for them to be asked on the day of judgment, like about prayer or about any of the laws of the Sharia. So here, hummilu, Tawrat, it doesn't just mean that they carried the Torah, but that they were accountable to it. They were accountable, he says, for the knowledge in the Torah, and accountable to act according to what was written therein. And he says they didn't act according to it. And so it's as if they never carried it, even though they are accountable for it. He mentions that this parable is about the Jews, and specifically, not obviously all Jews. We know from the Qur'an, Bani Israel, they're from, which we took in the previous surah, they were from the supporters of Isa alayhi salam, right? Some of them were from Ansarullah. So this is not like this is a very particular category that's being spoken about. So they were being made to bear the Torah. Being made to bear, again, it's an accountability. And he also mentions that the word asfara is not just like a regular book, but like the great big books. So I don't know if we have in here. What's the biggest book we have in this library? I thought we used to have one that was like so big, you had to lay it on its back. But meaning like something of great importance and significance, and it's huge. So it's the great big books. And these Jews are being compared, and it's not all, I just want to really emphasize that it's not all, because they're from the Jews, they're believers, right? And they were the followers of the Prophet Isa alayhi salam and the other prophets before them. But these are being spoken about in this way for a very particular reason that he outlines. So these Jews are being compared to donkeys because they were accountable for the Torah, and they read the Torah and they memorized it, and then they didn't act according to it, and they didn't benefit from its verses. And then there emerges amongst them a messenger of God, or the messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was prophesized in their own works. So they know that he's the messenger of God. Their books that they've read and they've memorized, it's prophesized his coming. And there's the glad tidings that he is there, that it's him. But then when he appeared with all of the signs that their books prophesied that he would appear with, right? And we know that in the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, one of the Jews that became Muslim came and asked the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ questions to test him, because he knew that the coming prophet was going to have certain qualities. And so he wanted to come and test the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he saw that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was indeed the one that was prophesied. That particular Jewish person became Muslim. Now, the others, they knew, they recognized it. They recognized the signs in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that was mentioned in their own books, but they refused to believe in him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they are compared to the donkeys carrying large, magnificent books of great knowledge that they walk around with, and they don't know or understand anything in it from it, except that which causes the donkey difficulty and tiredness. So, right, so if you think about a donkey that's loaded with books, the only thing it knows about those books is this makes me tired, right? This is heavy. I don't like it. So they're being compared to that you have a treasure, but you don't realize the treasure that you have. In another work, Imam Ibn Ajiba quotes that whoever learns and studies this religion and doesn't act by what they learned, and this does not mean we all need to be perfect. Perfection is for God. But this idea that someone would go to the extent of memorizing, go to the extent of learning, and then not intend to or try to act by what they learned, then this example of the donkey with the books extends to them as well. And that he says the donkey analogy applies to them. Now, something where we are warned about actually is, and may Allah protect all of us from it, is like from the first 3 people thrown into the hellfire. One of them is like a scholar, a scholar. He knows everything, like he studied it, but he's thrown into the hellfire because his intention for that study was so that he could basically become famous and kind of like lord over people. So that might be an example where that really comes into play. Again, may Allah protect us all. Imam al-Tibi, he says that the Jews, one of the things that in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they couldn't accept was that this prophet's going to come from al-Ummiyin, right? The unlettered people. And because it necessarily meant, when they heard that, it necessarily meant the prophet would have to be Arab. And so they rejected it. One of the reasons, it says, so their rejection is symbolized by the donkey. It doesn't know what it holds, what's inside, and what's inside of these great books. But also, there's another emphasis here, and it's gonna be mentioned, but they would say, like, we're Ahl al-Kitab, we're the people of the book. So how could the coming prophet be unlettered? Isn't he supposed to be able to read a book? So he can't possibly be. They would use that, and then it's going to come up how it's refuted a little bit later. So again, hummilu, to carry something, means to be accountable, and it means that they were enjoined to act in accordance with it. They had outward, superficial knowledge of what the books had, but they did not have true knowledge of what their scripture contained. Because if they had a true knowledge of what the scripture contained, then they would have believed in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ when they saw him. So that's a difference between sort of a superficial knowledge, is that the purpose of a knowledge that's not the truth, right? That doesn't really directly connect someone to God. It doesn't mean they can't memorize information, right? A lot of people can memorize information, and they can memorize it better than us. I remember one of my teachers, they said, if you go into academia, like Western liberal academia, there are non-Muslim professors who can quote the books of Rumi better than any Muslim can, and can quote all these things, but they don't get what they're saying. They don't even, there's no direct experiential knowledge of what is being discussed. And they think they're masters of Sufism, by the way. There's a lot of these people, they think they're masters of the field. And it's, no, you read books, it's not the same. So he says, they don't have true knowledge of what their scripture contained. So this is also the same charge that was brought against the priests in the past by the prophets of the past, of the Old Testament, in the books of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, and others. This was actually something that previous prophets came and told their congregations, you're not implementing the book, or you're not acting by it, or as mentioned in other places of the Qur'an, you're actually changing the book, right? You're omitting things and you're adding things. So this verse, or this verse is not simply a condemnation of the Jews for forgetting the tenets of Judaism, but there's also a warning for Muslims that this is how human beings often treat revelation. So I'm just going to repeat that. It's not a condemnation. I really want us to pick up on that. Unfortunately, a long time ago when I was in Egypt, I think I told you guys a story. I'm in, I think it was in a Friday khutbah or something. So I'm in class, or not in class, in the khutbah, and the Shaykh gets up and he asks everyone, why do you think Allah mentions Bani Israel in the Qur'an so much? Why do you think Allah mentions Bani Israel? And, I'm expecting him to say something else. And he goes, because Allah wants to tell us the Zionists, they have always been our enemies. I'm like, Bani Israel, they weren't even Zionists. First of all, talk about historical inaccuracy. But he politicized the entire thing. And I'm like, no, that's not, Allah will not mention their stories over and over and over again, except why do people share historical stories in outside of the Quran? Why does anyone share a historical story? So we don't repeat the same mistakes. So we learn from those people, the good, from those of Bani Israel who acted beautifully, and Allah praises them for it, and those of Bani Israel who acted terribly. Right. So here's one of the situations that there's a warning for us, is that we as Muslims, the example or the analogy of a donkey, may Allah protect us from that, obviously, can extend to us if we do to our revelation what the Jews did to their revelation in this particular context. There are some narrations that are mentioned here, but I couldn't locate their sources, so I'm not going to share them today, inshallah. If I do next week, then I'm going to come back and share them with you all. But essentially that we have, in a general way, prophetic advices in terms of the Qur'an. Really, these are ones that we know about and I think are commonly said. So one of them is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he mentioned to the companions that there's going to be a people who come and their Qur'an will be better than your Qur'an, and their tarawih, their prayer, is going to be better than your prayer, but it will not have gotten past their throats. So, commentators, Muslim historical commentators have said this may have been the Khawarij, who were actually known for their abundance of worship, but then they killed companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So they didn't understand what they were reading. And I want to say extremism often looks like that. Extremism often looks like overdoing all things worship related and then being very cruel and mean to people around. And that's just not religion, right? And we have more than enough examples in the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in terms of that, show us that example. Say, O you who are Jews, if you claim that you are friends unto God apart from other people, then long for death if you are truthful. Here Imam Ibn Ajibah, he mentions that they would say, and this is mentioned in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 18, Nahnu abna'ullah wa ahibba'uhu. We are the children of God and his most beloved ones. And so they're saying, if you really are this chosen people of God, then long for death. If it was true, and if you're to be trusted, then wish to die. And, this idea of being connected to God quickly. You would get to meet your creator. Imam Ibn Ajibah saying, to the domain of God's generosity. If you are actually, as you say you are, you would want that meeting to happen sooner rather than later. And this would be because you have a certainty of, when you meet God, there's going to be obviously bliss and reward. He says the domain of his generosity for his awliya, for the blessed, for the beloved loves to meet with their loved one, and to go from this world that's full of contamination to the world of happiness and bliss. Imam Suyuti, he says that if the Jews are indeed favored by God above others, they should actually prefer the hereafter to the life of this world, and rather than clinging to the life of this world. This idea of longing for death indicates that those who are sure of their standing before God would not fear the coming of death, but would actually welcome it. And that those who truly believe long to meet God. Again, there's the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, whosoever desires to meet God, God desires to meet him. And whosoever hates meeting God, then God hates to meet with him. There's it's going to come, but there's a really beautiful commentary from Imam al-Ghazali on this. I'm going to pace myself. So one of the things about the claim of we are the chosen people of God, what is that? Why is that a problem for us as Muslims? Do Muslims say we are the chosen people of God? Do Muslims believe that like we're all saved? Everyone else is going to be in the fire, but we're all saved. We don't believe that. We believe every single one of us are going to be. We believe that this is the true religion. The religion itself is the chosen religion of God, but we are not, quote unquote, the chosen people. We feel blessed to be given and guided to this religion. But you see how like the emphasis on the revelation itself and the emphasis on the divine gift and the emphasis on the religion as it's revealed is different than the emphasis on the followers being somehow superior to other human beings. And this is something that's a very distinct difference between sort of even the language, I want to say, that's used in the Qur'an and amongst Muslims than the language. I'm a religious studies major, so one of the things that I remember reading about was what is it, Gentiles, and what's the other one? There's two. There's like well, that'll be a different subject, but language is important in terms of it includes within it assumptions, right? So I remember once a lady was telling me that her father became Muslim right before he passed away, like 2 weeks before he passed away, he became Muslim. And then she said, just something very interesting to me. She said, he wasn't Muslim before Islam, but he was a believer. And I was like, and I wanted her to explain that a little bit, and that her father had an unwavering belief in one God. He just hadn't understood the religion, in any level. So until he could, and subhanAllah, 2 weeks before he passed away, it finally all came together and he was able to understand it and accept the religion. But like the idea that she was able to attest faith to someone who wasn't outwardly a practitioner of Islam, but he believed in God, he believed in God's oneness, and she had no doubt about that. I don't know, again, like any other religious tradition that can ascribe faith to someone who is not a direct adherent, but for us as Muslims, we're always like, Allah knows best what was in that person's heart. We even have a concept of a people called Ahlul Fatra, the people who the message of Islam didn't reach them in a proper way. And like scholars have talked about how they're accounting on the Day of Judgment. Some have said that they're just saved. Some have actually said they're just saved. Allah will not punish the people who didn't receive the message properly. And then others have said, no, there's going to be a special test for them. But even that, like within what does that do for us? It means that even when you're around someone in the community who's not Muslim, you don't necessarily assume you're better than them. We don't, you know what I mean? Like on Yawm al-Qiyamah, we will know who will stand where. That's it. So this idea that we're the chosen people is like, if you really are the chosen people, if you're really you really believe this, then you should want you should long for death. It's actually said that some of the actual awliya, they do long for death, not in a fatalistic way, not in like they've given up on the world and but more like their love of God is so much that they can't wait for the day to meet him. So they see death more as like a celebration than as something difficult. Wallahu alam. They're they're passing, especially when it's from some of the shuyukh, they're not called deaths, they're called, the anniversary of when they pass is called an urs. It's called a wedding. Because a wedding is when two beloveds come together. But this is here it's talking about creator and creation. And not in, obviously, that concept. It's symbolic language. I hope no one takes it the wrong way. So, but they will never long for it due to that which their hands have sent forth, and God knows the wrongdoers. That which their hands have sent forth is understood as a reference to their evil deeds, and especially in particular their denial of the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which they knew. It was a conscious denial. It was not a we don't know, we're not sure. It was more like we recognize you, but you're an Arab. And so, and then the distortion of the scriptures. They are subtly aware. There's an implication in these verses that they are subtly aware of what awaits them in the next life for their transgressions, and thus actually fear death. They deep down, there's an understanding that we're doing something opposite to what God wants us to do. So we don't long for death. We want this life to last as long as possible because we know when we do meet God, we're going to have something to answer for. I don't know if you've, as a child, have you ever gotten in trouble at school? Okay, and there's like, I don't know if this has happened with you. It's happened with me when I was a kid. There's a point where like the teacher's like, okay, I can't talk to you about this right now because we're in the middle of class. But at this time, then we're going to sit down and have a meeting about this, right? And from the time the teacher has told you that until the time that you're going to have that meeting with them, you are what? Dreading. You're dreading it because you're in trouble, right? And you're like wanting to extend this time as much as possible. Like, but there's a little bit of that in what's being implied here. They're subtly aware of what awaits them. And then there's this idea that the judgment that they receive in the next life, as well as some of the evil that befalls them in this life, is a result of that which their hands have sent forth. Allah mentions in Surah Ar-Rum, verse 41, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. That like evil has become apparent in the oceans and on land because of what the hands of people have brought about. That's I could go into a long tangent on that. Okay, I will. A short tangent. So I just came out of an Islamic history class, and this was like the most awesome Islamic history class I've ever taken in my entire life. Dr. Mona Hassan. I asked her, I'm like, have you ever taught this class in a Muslim community setting? And she said no. So maybe if we can have her come and do this class. It was an intensive. And so finally, like everything came together. But one of the things that I remember reading in her readings, these are all predominantly non-Muslim historians who are looking into the history of the Muslim world, is that one of the readings mentioned, actually two of the readings mentioned that if anyone were to have visited, like if an alien had come down to planet Earth in the 13th century, not 13th, 14th century, they would have assumed, in the 14th century, they would have assumed that the whole world is about to convert to Islam. That's what they would have assumed. Another reading also said the same thing. If someone who was coming in from the outside world were to just look at the world, any fair historian would have assumed that the whole world's about to become Muslim. And then that doesn't happen. We have the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And one of the readings that mentions that this is not because of the decadence of the Muslim Ummah or the Muslim societies. It's actually because of unprecedented events that disrupted the economic order of the world, not just for the Muslims, but any other economy in the world at that time, including China. And essentially what they're saying is it was chattel slavery, the Atlantic slave trade, as well as after that industrialization that completely dislodged basically the Muslim world in terms of where it was as like a primary world power, if you can use that term. But the interesting thing about that is I've heard you say this before in the prior taking this class, is that the Islamic civilization, the scholars in that civilization, the thinkers and everyone they were contributing, they had in their time the knowledge of all that would be needed for an industrial revolution. They saw the capacity to do what Europe later on did, but they actually put on the brakes and they said, no, we're not going to do that. Right. And because they recognize this is going to disrupt everything. Right. And if we look at post-industrialization, like I'm not blaming anyone, inshallah, but this idea of the pollution that has just look at the climate today. This is we're still, suffering as a globe, in terms of the environment, the oceans, the like. There's all sorts of data about how much longer can the Earth survive the current systems that exist in the world that are polluting it and destroying everything. If you have like ice caps melting in Antarctica, and you have rainforests being devoured, and you have all these kinds of things that are just destroying the planet left and right, and how much oxygen is being produced versus how much carbon dioxide is in the world. And you watch any of these planet Earth episodes, right? And you get like, how did we come to this? And it's like that starting point was a point that the Muslim scientists and scholars and thinkers and the people that were really the reason why Europe ended up having a renaissance, they saw all of that and said, no, we're not going in that direction. Even the idea of the factory, right? Where you have a bunch of people in an assembly line and each person just does one thing all day long and someone else does something else all day long. They removed meaning from the lives of human beings. They became like machines, right? And so there's like spiritual problems there as well. It's not like Muslims who invented so many of the things that the world is benefiting from, that they didn't see the possibilities there, but they knew to stay away from it. And so essentially what the historians are saying is, they didn't lose power because they didn't have power. They lost power because they weren't going to cheat. They weren't going to do the things that everybody else wanted to do to get ahead. Was there a version of slavery that existed in the world amongst the Muslims? Yes, but it was not chattel slavery, which is a whole nother kind of oppression that the world hadn't yet seen. If you think about it today, if you think about all the corporations or companies, if America today, if all the employees of a business were unpaid, right? They're just labor, they're owned by the company leaders. What would happen to the economy? You'd have whoever the CEO is would be very rich. Everybody else would be dirt poor slaves, right? And they'd be able to sell their products at a level that no economy in the world could compete with because you're not paying for labor. That's essentially what happened with slavery. So the Muslim community or the Muslim Ummah before then, one of the things it mentions over and over again from different readings is that when they were the ones that were the sort of like leading international trade, every single partner financially benefited. But they also closed off certain ports and didn't allow certain sort of trading circuits to enter into those areas. They actually stopped them at the front and said, we're going to trade the rest of your goods, but you can't come into these lands. But that partner still made money. So every single participant would actually do well. It was a time of prosperity for anyone who was in it. Versus when the Portuguese showed up, their actual trade ships were misunderstood as pirate ships because they had war weaponry on them. And so the idea for that was not participating in a system where everyone benefits and safe seas. It was actually taking out your competition, which didn't exist when the international trade was led by the quote unquote Islamic system that was there, Islamic world system. Anyways, that's a tangent. But the point is, alhamdulillah, is that there was a time when our values and what we were doing in economically, what we're doing in trade, what we're doing in politics, they were all interrelated. And it led to not only prosperity for the Muslims and the Muslim so-called empire, but it led to the prosperity of anyone who partnered with them. China was benefiting, India was benefiting, like all these non-Muslim societies, they all benefited financially from this setup. Okay. Forgive me. Something also that's interesting in that is when the Mongols first invaded the Muslim lands, everyone thought it was the end of the world. Like the scholars of that time, they thought it was the end of the world. They had never experienced Islam in a situation where there's not a Khalifa and there's not a Khilafah. And so the Mongols, they actually stormed the palace of the Khalifa, and they killed the Khalifa in front of everyone. Like it was a very humiliating, and they described it as the humiliation of the Ummah. And they really thought it was the end of the world because they hadn't seen that kind of mutilation and public destruction of the Muslim lands before. That was unprecedented. That happens, and then what happens afterwards is so shocking. What happens afterwards? What was that? They become Muslim, which is, and then before they become Muslim, what also happens? Some people get out of the area that they have a stronghold in and they create Fatimid Egypt, right? So it's like this is a time when the Shia were actually in charge of Egypt, but they actually founded Al-Azhar University. And then at some point, okay, Allah's planning. At some point, the Mongols become Muslim, and the Fatimids actually invite Salah ad-Din to come to Egypt to help them because they can't maintain their borders, they can't do all of these things. So Salah ad-Din comes, and not only does he, defeat the Crusaders, he also shuts down Al-Azhar for 100 years. Then it's restarted as a Sunni institution. For the rest of history, it's a Sunni institution. So many things, like history is great. We have to study history, but so many things like in terms of assuming everything's gone wrong, everything's the way it's quote unquote not supposed to go. How it couldn't get any worse than this. Like there's definitely tragedy, tribulation, and test. But if you can take a long enough sort of step back, even in this world, like forget if you were to compare it to this, to the real step back, as if you look at al-akhirah, but if you take a step back long enough in this world, you end up seeing like a divine plan unravel itself. I went down a tangent. I think it was about their hands have sent forth evil deeds, right? And that this will show up on the earth in different ways. Imam al-Kawashi, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala catches the lies of these Jews in three different things. First is that they had pride in themselves, that they were the awliya of Allah. And so he tells them, if you really are, then wish for death. And then he says that you claim that you're from Ahl al-Kitab, and that the Arabs have no writing for them to be considered from Ahl al-Kitab, but the evidence is in the fact that your kitab is saying what this kitab is bringing, right? So just because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is unlettered doesn't mean that he did not come without a kitab, right? So they said, we're from Ahl al-Kitab, you're unlettered. Okay, well, there's a kitab, right? So there's that. And the third one was actually something else that's not related to here, but it is related to the surah at some level, is that these Jews, they recognized Sept, right, the Sabbath, and they also claimed that Muslims don't have anything that's equivalent. And then they said, no, Allah gave the Muslims al-Jum'ah. So, and this is another one that they're confronting with in the surah. Imam Ibn Ajib says that none of you want death, rather you flee from it. You couldn't dare want to die out of fear of being punished for your disobedience. Say, truly the death from which you flee will surely meet you, then you shall be returned to the knower of the unseen and the seen, and he will inform you of that which you used to do. This idea that this death which you flee will surely meet you, whether you die from fighting on a battlefield or any of the different ways that a person dies, death will meet everyone. So, and this is just a warning and a reminder that no matter what you do, no matter how you try to protect yourself, no matter how you try to preserve life on this earth, death will certainly meet you. Then you shall be returned to the knower of the unseen. And here he says, nothing that you do is hidden from him. Nothing that you intend is hidden from Allah. And he's the knower of the unseen and the seen. And it's always interesting when it's mentioned that he's the alimul ghaiba wa shahada. Always the ghaib, the unseen, comes first. And he will inform you of that which you used to do. In commenting upon this verse, Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali mentions human beings of 4 different dispositions with regards to death. The first is the one who's engrossed with this world, so that remembering death actually only increases their distance from God. So in Surah Taha, for mankind, their reckoning draws nigh, while they turn away heedless. It's mentioned, Imam Ghazali mentions that these people are going to have an unfortunate end because the Prophet ﷺ has said, whoever hates meeting with God, then God hates meeting with them. Then there's a second category, and these are the penitents. They do not abhor death, they don't hate death, but they fear the meeting with God because they're aware of their deficiencies and know that they'll be held accountable for their sins. They thus busy themselves with preparing for death. Then there's the third category, those with spiritual knowledge, or al-arifun. They remember death constantly and yearn for it, as a lover yearns for the meeting with the beloved. And then last, there's the highest spiritual rank, and they don't yearn for either death nor life, but they only yearn for that which pleases their Lord. So basically, they're in such a state of surrender that whether they live or they die is equivalent to them, because what they want is whatever God wants. God is the knower of the unseen, and the seen indicates that the intentions behind actions cannot be hidden from God. And also, God is the knower of the unseen. So in terms of the reminder to the Jews at that time who are plotting against the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, it's like he knows what you're doing. Also a reminder for ourselves that that God is the knower of the unseen. These are things that are hidden, right? So like when in terms of our actions, our outward actions, everyone can see, but our inward states, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see. And I heard something from actually Dr. Mona when we were taking the history class about, we're in a particular chapter dealing with Muslim character, and some of the statements of the scholars of character. And one of the statements like stuck with me, which was, if you think that you're better than a dog, then you still have some arrogance in your heart you need to remove. And so I was like, oh, wow, I have a lot of work to do. I was like, dog is a bad word in my language. No, it is a bad word. So, and then she talked about it a little bit. She was like, a dog, for example, is an animal that is automatically fulfilling the purpose by which God has created it. Are we fulfilling the purpose by which God has created us? I was like, I think it's also significant in terms of personal reflection, that he's the knower of the unseen, and so much of what we try to improve with ourselves usually deals with outward actions, right? I was telling you guys I want to just drink less coffee, right? That's actually an easier, believe it or not, that's an easier thing to work on. Maybe a little bit less easy if there's a real addiction, but but still a little bit easier than like inward things, in terms of don't allow my thoughts to become negative, or to assume things, or to have hidden pride or hidden arrogance or hidden self-doubt. There's all these spiritual diseases that are much harder to like clean out of our hearts. And so he's the knower of that unseen and the seen. When we think about like just the emphasis in Muslim community life, it's always do more of something. Don't pray 20 rak'ahs, pray 30 rak'ahs for tarawih. Don't pray, it's always like increase the quantity of it. But like emphasis on really improving the quality, that's something that there's no like pat you can give on your back for that, because if you do a big number of anything, you can put a little check next to it, you start to feel good. Your nafs will appreciate it. But when you're doing something inward, a lot of times cleaning up the inward doesn't feel good, right? Like confronting yourself and saying like, you really need to let that go and just forgive them. That's not something that is an easy thing to do. It doesn't feel good, but our approach to purification doesn't always feel good. It's like New Age spirituality is about feeling high about things all the time, and like what is it, affirmations in the mirror, and like, you're so great and you can do it and all of this. And there's a high to it, but there's also like, you're not doing the work. Spirituality also has, or spiritual purification also requires us to do some work. And in the words of Imam Zayd, spirituality is not about feeling good, it's about being good. And then God informs all human beings of the true nature of what they did while on this earth. And he requits those who did good with what is good, and those who did evil with what their actions merit. This is one of several verses in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the final judgment is with God. He will inform people about their actions in this life. And one of the things I think is significant in that he will inform you is there's no point in denial, right? There's no point in being in denial for certain things, because there's going to be a day for everyone on earth where there is no such, like, denial is not going to help anyone. So, before God informs us in a way where it's like we denied, we want to acknowledge certain things ourselves, within ourselves, so that we can, to turn back is a very easy matter, right? Denial, one of the worst things about denial is you made it impossible to fix it if you're in denial of something. And as Sobi, as you mentioned earlier, just having awareness of something is a sufficient thing to know that this is okay. I'm not over this particular issue and I need to work on it. Interestingly, there's a therapist, a very elderly lady who's a therapist, and she mentioned something about two different kinds of people who face trauma. She says there's certain people, they face trauma, but they bury it so low and they appear initially to be more functional than everyone else. But then this trauma comes out in times and places they don't expect, and it creates a lot of dysfunction for them. And it kind of like surprises them, right? Because they haven't acknowledged it. They're not willing to acknowledge it. They're burying it. And then another person has gone through a trauma, maybe the same trauma, but they always keep it. It's not like they're focused on it, but they don't allow themselves to have denial about it. Meaning they recognize at all times, okay, and you're someone who's gone through this, and so because it's present with them, there's enough self-awareness that, like, it's not comfortable for that thing to be there, right? It doesn't bring anyone a sense of comfort, but it's more like there's an awareness and an acceptance, so that it actually doesn't cause dysfunction. It's with them, but it doesn't trip them up. It doesn't surprise them. It doesn't, and they tend to be a little bit less, maybe, what's the word? Extrovert is the wrong term. Happy-go-lucky about everything, because there's an acknowledgement of this reality. Now, trauma aside, ourselves, and knowing that God is the knower of everything that's unseen within us, that's going to be related to the assignment, inshallah, for us for this week. Initially, I was going to do something related to Qur'an, but I'm like, what we do with tafsir is kind of already an application of it, because we're trying to understand it, we're trying to apply the lessons. But in terms of this week, it's going to be to look at a quality that is within us from the unseen, from things that no one but God would know what this issue is. And it can be a positive thing you're striving for, like from, again, it's something from the unseen, or it could be a negative thing you want to eradicate, which it could be either one. And as we're, inshallah, for this week, we're going to work on an unseen spiritual quality. And again, it could be something you want to remove or something you want to add into, or better the quality of who you are in some way and what you do. And that's going to be the assignment, inshallah. Yeah, so an example would be, an unseen quality is actually to cultivate love in your heart for your brothers and sisters, right? So it could be, how does it play out in an assignment, is like to actively, in a setting where you are with your brothers and sisters, to allow your heart to love the person that's in front of you, and to intentionally be there to love and serve them. Now, you're not going to say, I'm here to love and serve you, you know, but it's an unseen reality in your heart. It's going to play out in the way you behave with it. Maybe it's not going to play out in any overt action, but it's like an intention in your heart. It's really an intention. It's a niyyah. And it's unseen. No one knows that intention is there, but Allah would see it. And inshallah, reward you for it. If it's something you want to get rid of, it could be, trying to think of an unseen quality. Well, I think all of these things, they can manifest in our behavior, but no one would know what's in your heart. No one would know if it is or is not in your heart. So it could be something like if a competitiveness with someone, or another unseen quality could be like that you want to get rid of is if you have a grudge against someone, just removing it. You're not even going to see them. Maybe they're not even someone who's around here, but that's just something that's unseen to the rest of the world, but God sees it in our hearts. It could be, again, someone that needs to be forgiven, or thinking that you're better than others. That might be one, like in terms of, that's a thought, right, that goes into a person's mind. But it's like, okay, so when Imam Shaykha, for example, would say, I would not sit in a room except that I would leave thinking that I'm the worst of those in that room. So what does that indicate? Does that mean that he entered the room thinking before he saw anyone, I'm the worst? Or was that like a process for him? Like that he looked around at everyone and he's admired probably something beautiful in each person that he didn't have. And then he could leave feeling that way. So it's like to inculcate humility. And Imam Shafi'i is someone who, how could anyone think he's the worst person in the room? From our standards, he's the best person in any room he entered, you know, Wallahu a'lam, like in terms of his scholarship at such a young age. Like there's no one who could compete with at least the outward. Obviously Allah knows the inward, but the fact that he did that, right? Or actually Imam Shafi'i has a lot of these. Another one is when he would get into an argument with someone or a debate, he would actually silently make dua that Allah would place the right answer on the mouth of his opponent, and that Allah would grant him the tawfiq to accept it. You know, that's beautiful to me. Like, how many of us want to win the argument? Oh man. Yeah. That's it. I'm Afghan. That one speaks to me a lot. So, but so it could be each one of us a different thing. Alhamdulillah, we have some Majlis volunteers that do things. They don't say this to you guys, but I just found out because I sneak. But there's people who literally, like, as every person is entering the room, they make silent dua for the people who come in, and they do really other things that no one would know. But it's it could be anything good, but just something from the unseen. Work on something from the unseen, inshallah. Any other thoughts or questions? Oh, it's 8:15. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to wrap up, inshallah. Also, again, a reminder, we have our annual banquet on the first Sunday of Ramadan at a country club in Seal Beach. Information is over here to my left. Oh, early bird. I didn't know. Okay, early bird tickets and Friday, so get them soon. Prices do increase after Friday, and it's worth it to get it for not the price increase. Inshallah. Is it on the Majlis website? Yeah, it's on the Majlis website, and there's a QR code right there that will take you straight to registration. Inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى وجعلنا من عبيدك سعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم آمين يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived, and peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.